Welcome into the latest edition of ESPN FC live here on ESPN Plus. I'm Dan Thomas, joined. How's the heart, Stevie? All right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, biz now, I bet. Stevie Nicol with us here in the studio. Brilliant day of football right across the board. Later on, we're reflecting on that 7-goal thriller between Barca and Villarreal. Plus, Lionel Messi scores again. We'll start, though, in the Premier League. Liverpool taking on Newcastle. What an eventful game this turned out to be. Celebrations all round then as Liverpool take all 3 points from Newcastle. We welcome to the show Nadim and Nunez here, as is Jan Arger Fjordtoft. But let's start with Liverpool and Stevie, shall we? We'll talk about all the controversies and decisions later on. But just as a spectacle overall, this was something else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's many Liverpool fans would have been sitting at 1-0 down, 10 men, down a man, thinking they would get a victory. Probably not even thinking they get a draw, because I didn't. I couldn't see how it was going to materialise. Newcastle at home, I expected the second half to be an onslaught from Newcastle, but it just didn't materialise. Yes, Liverpool defended well. They got numbers behind the ball and didn't give them a lot of space. But you got to question Newcastle and you got to question Eddie Howe. You know, if you can't get your team going a man up at home with that crowd behind you, I think that asks questions about how you motivate your side or the lack of motivation from the sideline. It's one thing to know your X's and O's and your tactics and all that fancy stuff. But when it comes down to raw motivation, people like Klopp, people like Guardiola, he didn't have that today. He just didn't. And I think that hurt them big time. But for Liverpool, you know what? They didn't give up the ghost. Alisson made that crucial save. And the 2 goals, one was a little fortunate, but the second one was a great move, great ball through, great finish. And I think it showed you that Liverpool, even with 10 men, are a group. They're a team. They stuck together and they pulled it out at Newcastle, which not many teams with 10 men will be able to do.
Nadim, this was silly, wasn't it?
Yeah, I didn't expect this, to be honest. I think given the way that Alexander-Arnold started and then you see the red card for Van Dijk, you know, these are 2 senior players that are struggling in that moment. So I'm thinking Newcastle with a 1-0 lead, that's probably going to be the game. I was watching it thinking, this is going to get a bit boring now, Liverpool going to sit back. But in fairness to them, they hung around and you could see Newcastle. I don't think they played bad.
Well, we've lost Nadim. Jan, we may as well go to you then. What have you got to say?
Yeah, I'm a losing prize here. Now, what I think is interesting, Dan and Stevie, we are in round 3 of the Premier League, and there are some statement results. These are one of those results that can direct the season for you. When you 1-0 down, 1 man down, great save from Alisson, and you manage to come back. And I think this is very vital for Liverpool because Liverpool need that kind of results. They had a bad season last season, coming back now, winning at Newcastle. That could be decisive. And for Nunez, if I may say, I hear when I speak to the journalists, the pundits from Liverpool, they say he doesn't get it, he doesn't understand it. I guess that is also with the language barrier and all those kind of things. But today, Klopp, Jota making the assist for the first goal, Nunez coming in, getting 2 goals. This is big. This is big. And against the Newcastle, who wants to take the next step. And now in 2 games, they lost to Manchester City. They lost to Liverpool at home, where they should have won the game. So this is a massive, this is a big game already in round 3 of the Premier League.
A lot of surprises in this game. The biggest one for me was that my phone didn't ring when Darwin Nunez scored the first one, Stevie.
Well, I was too busy screaming at the TV.
Right.
But I had to eventually call you.
Yeah, you called me after the second goal.
You were the first person I thought of when he scored.
Well, I thought that might be the case.
I had my fist pumped, I was screaming at the TV, and I just wished that Dan Thomas had been sat next to me.
Right.
So I could grab you and shove Nunez in your face.
How defining a moment could this be for him as a Liverpool player?
This is a difference for a player of having an opportunity and not even thinking for any sort of time whether you're going to score or not. You know you're going to score, as opposed to going through in a similar position and thinking about it. That's the difference.
Right.
And if he can do that, because you know he's always going to get... I don't remember a game he's played where he hasn't had opportunities. It's always been that final piece.
Yeah.
And so if he takes those 2 goals on board the way I think he will, and his mentality becomes, well, where am I putting it in the net, as opposed to, is it going to go in the net? That is night and day for a striker. Ask Jan, he'll tell you.
Well, let's ask him, Jan.
Yeah, it's a fair point, because you think, I was at Bramall Lane today, I saw Erling Haaland missing a penalty, but he still kept on going. There's just this thing that I will get a goal at the end. And then you have Nunez on the other hand, who's been an example of a striker who scores goals, but he doesn't do it just scoring. That is a part of my habit. I just score the goals. And a lot of goal getting and a lot of goal scorers, it's all about in the head, because a goal getter can say in interviews afterwards, they can say, yeah, it's all about getting the chances. No, it's not even close. It's all about getting the goals. And Nunez, how he did it today, the first goal, I mean, that was the only place he could hit the ball. And then he makes the second. So it's all happening. Remember, a striker who don't score goals, he will think, I will never, ever score again. And people will say, this is just a way of saying, no. If you're in that position, you go 2 or 3 or 4 games without scoring a goal, you actually in bed, going to sleep, and you think, what happened if I, as a goal getter, will never score again? And that is nothing different between these world-class strikers. They got the same mentality. They got the same or lack of mentality that everybody else. And for Nunez, this could be decisive. And hopefully, Klopp can use this momentum, because he got to find a place for him also, that you have to trust him, be there, being in the starting 11.
Why were Newcastle so weird in the second half, Nadem? You're 1-0 up in front of a sellout crowd. You're one player up as well. But they just didn't seem to grab the game by the scruff of the neck like maybe you'd expect them to.
Well, you say that, but I think Liverpool playing a bit differently probably suited them more than it did Newcastle, because all of a sudden Newcastle, they have a lot of the ball, but it's most of the ball at the back. You know, you can try and pass and probe, but it's not really making that much of a difference to the way Liverpool are going to be. I thought defensively they were good. And I think best of all, from a Liverpool perspective, they finished the game with Jota, finished the game with Salah and Darwin Nunez playing up top. So Newcastle, they knew that, you know, they could go for it, but it's a great chance that they get caught on the break. And as a consequence, they never really felt comfortable being the team in the ascendancy with the extra player. So fair play to Liverpool for doing that. I don't think Newcastle were that bad overall. But like I say, Liverpool were just biding their time. The longer they stayed in with the game, you know, this is something that could happen. Don't get me wrong, I didn't expect it to happen. But what a result. And Klopp saying himself, it's probably one of his best results at Liverpool ever. So, you know, fair play to them for being able to turn it around.
That would have to be a worry for Eddie Howe. That's 2 games in a row at City and against Liverpool where they haven't been able to hold the ball, even against 10 men with Liverpool. I mean, we talk about how when it's emotional, Newcastle are at their best. When the crowd gets behind them and they're getting after teams, that's when they're at their best. But you can't do that every single time. You can't go 100 miles an hour for 90 minutes, game after game after game, home or away. So there has to be times in the game where you keep the ball and take the air out of the game, take the advantage of having that extra man by knocking it around. And what the good teams do is they knock the ball around at pace and start moving the 10 men around and suck the energy out of them. And then when somebody flags, because there's always one,
right,
then you strike. But if you can't keep the ball, all you're doing every time you cough it up is encouraging the opposition to keep going. And that's what Newcastle have certainly done today. But against Man City, they couldn't get a breather because they couldn't keep the ball, which if you look at the team on paper, seems a strange thing that they can't keep the ball.
Let's just talk about some of those decisions, shall we? Starting off with the Van Dijk red card.
Yeah, I think from the moment the referee gives the free kick, then he's going to be sending him off, given the location. I think they've got this idea that, I think there's a traffic light system, and because it's so central, I think he will send him off. But that sort of incident, I think you see that around the pitch elsewhere. Because initially I saw it and I thought, well, he must have won the ball because the ball's changed direction. I think the ref in other instances might have thought that, but on this particular instance, he saw it. I've watched it back and I thought, yeah, well, he does make contact with Isak, but he also gets the ball as well. But if the ref decided that the contact is the most important thing, then unfortunately, I think it has to be a red card. And for Klopp, he's obviously very emotional about that decision, but the truth will come out when tomorrow, will he appeal it or will he accept it? And I think when someone tells him how it's going to work, he's probably going to just accept it.
Jan?
Well, first of all, I think that the referees will never admit it, but I think there is also an influence that he didn't give a red card to Alexander-Arnold because he should be sent off with 2 yellow cards. When you see the situation as it is, I'm with Nate and all is saying there, for me, Van Dijk had to go. That is quite clear for me.
The argument is, isn't it, that Isak doesn't have control of the ball. It's not necessary that he's going to be in that goal-scoring... I'm trying. But he has got a goal.
I don't understand how that can even come into play. He didn't have control of the ball. A, because he didn't have the chance to control the ball. B, he wouldn't have controlled the ball anyway. He would have let the ball run through, which would have put him through. And Van Dijk is absolutely in the wrong place. He's 100% in the wrong place. He has no choice but to try and win the ball. Because Isak's gone. He's picked up a bad starting position, and Isak is gone. And this nonsense about he didn't have control of the ball. I mean, come on. So a defender's just going to take somebody out of the game before the ball gets to them because they're out of position, and that's just going to be a foul? I mean, come on.
This is what our friend... I just want to say, Mark Clattenburg texted me and said, I understand the call is if a foul, the referee thinks of denying a goal-scoring opportunity. I never thought red at the time, and I still do not think it's clear and obvious red card.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Not his friend.
That is, but I guess this, Dan, first of all, is a week that we know the mates are looking after mates. I'm not saying Mark is doing that. I'm just making a joke on that. But it was interesting for Klopp that he had a definition, and I saw the press conference live, and he had and you had it now at ESPN as well. He said he hit him when he was on his way to get in touch of the ball. That is a new rule I've never heard of. That means that you can, as long as you're on your way to get the ball, then you can do whatever you want coming down to it. But I'll see. I think that Liverpool, with the successful rate they have on protesting on red cards, they will probably go for this one. But I don't think that will be positive for them, because I think that when the referee makes that call, that is a red card.
What about Trent Alexander-Arnold, Nadem? Should he have gone?
100%. After the first one, the ref can decide whether it's soft or not. But, there is a direct... at the start of the season, the players were told that referees were going to be giving out yellow cards for throwing the ball, dissent, time wasting, stuff like that. So for the first one, it might feel soft, but the players should know that's what it's going to be. And then the second one, he's pushed him over, he's clipped his heels, he's not made an attempt to play the ball. It's the easiest yellow card you could give. So then when you think of it as a Newcastle player or whatever, you look at the ref and say, well, why is that not yellow? Because there's a good chance you'll be booked in a second for something that could be softer. So I think in that moment, that's a huge error from the ref. And maybe he thinks he made a mistake with the first, but you don't compound it by making something that obvious just not be a yellow card. I think it's a shocking decision.
Jan?
Yeah, I'm 100%. Absolutely. And... he's a very lucky man, Alexander-Arnold, to stick on the pitch. But we know how he's like. And I'm again reference to Bramall Lane today. I interviewed Heckingbottom after the game, the Sheffield United manager, and what he wanted to say, speaking between the lines, there is a difference between the teams. And refereeing is man management. And maybe he was in doubt, maybe that he felt that this throw the ball away was too soft. What do I know? But it's a clear red card. He should be off, and he must be the luckiest man at St James's Park.
Mark Clattenburg says no second yellow, Stevie.
Well, he's just...
No, he doesn't really. Don't
do this. Don't do this to us.
I suppose last word on this. Overall, how does this affect both teams' seasons going forward? Or does it? Or are we just making too much of it?
No, I think it'll definitely kick Liverpool into gear. If they had lost this game today, that's a horrible start. Horrible start.
Right.
There's no question this early in the season will galvanise Liverpool together. It's very difficult to explain what it does to a squad, because it doesn't just affect the 11 on the field, it affects the whole building and everybody in it. And that's what this does for Liverpool. I get the impression after Man City last week and this Liverpool this week, this won't affect Newcastle that much as it will push Liverpool the other way. Because the way Newcastle played these last 2 games, they don't believe that they should be up with the big boys. And so the fact that they ended up losing this, they'll put it down to experience. The coaching staff will say it's another learning curve. It'll be all that sort of rhetoric. And so they'll just move on. And whoever they play next at home, all of a sudden they'll be back to this swashbuckling team that tries to get forward. But the fact is, I don't think Newcastle believe that team and that squad and that coach. I don't think they believe they belong with the big boys yet.
Nadim, do you agree?
I think it's going to ask a few questions because now as you look at it, they've lost 2 of the last 3 games and I think they're playing Brighton next week. So for that could go 2 ways. They could have a nice bounce back against a good side or that could be 3 defeats in a row potentially. And if that's the case, then this is a side that should in theory be wondering about competing with the top 4. Well, if they don't have a good start, that job just becomes that little bit more difficult. The belief saps just that little bit, especially before they've started the Champions League run as well. So I think the next game is going to be a very big one for them because the performances can be fine, but it's a results business, is it not?
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.